We can do that. And then I'll just start by saying, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you with us today for the Hot Topics. We have a couple of announcements before we dive into our speaker, Lindsey Kimery. Debbie, would you like to share about the meeting about closed primaries?
Sure, thanks so much. So the State League has been very interested in a legislative issue that's come up this year that would change our primary system to a closed primary system if it passed. And so with that in mind, we are hosting an event, a Zoom event on February 9th with Jeremy Gruber, who is the vice president for an organization called openprimaries.org. So you can already imagine where their position is, but basically they're seeing this as open primaries creates more voting access. And that's really the way that we are looking at it. So I am putting in the chat the link if people want to register for it for February 9th. So with that, I turn it back over to you, Laura, for the next announcement that you want to make.
Yes, and I would like to invite everyone on Friday, February 10th from noon to 1. We are going to have a meeting with some of the Nashville delegation to the state legislature. I reached out to all of the members of the delegation and invited them. Some of them had some conflicts. Obviously, they're busy at this time of year, but we have so far confirmed 4 members of the delegation, including Senators Heidi Campbell and Charlene Oliver, and Representatives John Ray Clemens and Caleb Hemmer. So it should be a really great meeting. We can hear about their priorities for the upcoming legislative session. And I'm going to put the RSVP information in the chat and also the details in the chat in case you didn't hear that and you want to jot them down, and you can copy down those details. And then if you plan to attend, please RSVP by Monday so we can get an accurate count for lunch and catering. And then I'll hand it over to Karin to introduce our guests today.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. This is the Hot Topics for February. And just before we start, I would like you to know that there will be a Hot Topics in March, and it will also be on the first Friday, as it always is, at noon. And it will be Dr. Dan Firth speaking about the Tennessee Waste Reduction and Recycling Act, which is an extended producer responsibility bill that is currently in the legislature. He'll talk about EPR, recycling, waste reduction, and then generally what the bill is attempting to do. So that is the next Hot Topics. And so put that on your calendar, and it's recycling. So reduction too. So today, we have Lindsey Kimery, who is the coordinator of library services at Metro Nashville Public Schools. And she also is the past president of the Tennessee Association of School Librarians. She's on the American Association of School Librarians and also an organization called the Future Ready Libraries. She has been in the Tennessee Public Schools for over 20 years, which is kind of hard to believe looking. You were a babe when you started. So Lindsey is going to be sharing with us some legislation that was from last session, but also some possible legislation from this session that has had effects on school libraries, school librarians. Just so those of you who know about or don't know about the legislative session, yesterday, basically all of the bills that have to be filed were filed like a couple days ago. And in the last day or two, I don't know, a ridiculous number came in, which is, I guess, what it always happens, which means that you can't, it's very hard to know exactly what's out there. But Lindsey will help us get a sense of some of the things that the librarians are concerned about. So I'm not going to go through all of the other pieces that she might be bringing into it, but I will allow, if she will also have time at the end for questions and answers. So please put your questions in the chat. And I will help her, or she might just run it herself, because I have a feeling she totally gets how to do this. So if please, Lindsey, I pass it to you now.
All right. Thank you, Karen, for inviting me. And hi, everybody. I'm Lindsey Kimery. I'm a mom of 4 sons, a former English teacher and middle school librarian, and currently in my role, I support 130 school librarians and 44 clerks in Metro Nashville Public Schools. So as Karen mentioned, I also serve in my state school library professional organization and nationally with the American Association of School Librarians. And coming from a family of educators, my mom taught for 32 years. My sister is a kindergarten teacher. This is just something that's important to my family. And so I entered education because I love to read and write, because this is something that is near and dear to my family's heart. And then to this day, I still hear from students I had many, many, many years ago who, believe it or not, have children of their own in some cases. And occasionally they reconnect and are so kind to say what a difference that someone like me made in their lives. And so that means so much to me. And I never thought that being a librarian would be controversial. And I never thought that my profession would undergo such scrutiny, and educators like me would be called some of the worst names imaginable. So we're going to break that down today and I'll walk you through it. So as Karen mentioned, I am going to talk about kind of what's been going on at the national level. We're going to start up high, and then we're going to zoom in to Tennessee and talk about what's next. And then I will share some resources that you can share with others, because if someone does have a concern about a book, I do want them to know that there's a process that they can go through with their school district. They have options, they have choices. So we want to let them know what's available to them. And then I'll share some resources in case you want to explore further how to help support the fight for intellectual freedom. Okay, as this quote by Dr. Stephen Krashen mentions, school libraries support the curriculum and provide an important point of access for our students. In fact, 87% of students get books from their school libraries. And as the quote mentions, reading what you want to read is responsible for most of our literacy development. So when we put up barriers and we create barriers to access to our school libraries, that has great potential to interrupt our students' literacy development. And we know that strong literacy skills lay such a solid foundation for our students to be college and career ready and set them up for success. And there's just nothing like seeing a student find what they want to read and what they love to read. And so teachers, librarians, and families play a huge part in this. With that in mind, let's jump in and take a look at the threat we are facing to students' abilities to have book choice and to discover what they like to read. So Unite Against Book Bans has been tracking data based on reports from the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom. And the number of book challenges has been just significantly climbing. So compare these numbers to 381 challenges in 2021 and 156 in 2020. This map from PEN America highlights where these bans are happening, and they note in 2022, book bans impacted nearly 4 million students in the United States. And you can see that Tennessee represents one of the states that has had a very high number of book bans. So when it comes to the types of books that are most frequently banned, we see that books with LGBTQ plus themes, characters, and books that feature characters from this community make up the majority. We do serve students from the LGBTQ plus community and students of color, which represents the second highest category of books targeted. Our schools are more diverse than ever. I mean, just in Metro alone, we serve nearly 80,000 students. They speak 126 different languages. And it's beautiful to serve such a diverse population. I enjoy it tremendously. But as our schools are more diverse than ever, it's also a representation of how our state is more diverse than ever. And as we serve all students, this data is concerning when we think about the narratives that are being removed and the voices that are potentially going to go missing from our school library collections. So as far as the types of books that are being banned, you see that fiction, and then on the right, you see young adult books are frequently the focus. And so young adult books are typically written for more of a high school audience. So you're not going to find those in elementary schools. And repeatedly last year during the legislative session, we heard things like a book called Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl by Jesse Andrews was in an elementary school. And I repeatedly said, tell me where that was. I will go there personally and talk with the librarian. It's clearly a young adult book. Most fiction is written on a lower level, fifth grade level, because that is very accessible, to the general population. But the audience for the book is high school. So this would not be a book that a school librarian would select for an elementary school. We have significant training through our master's degrees, so we know these things. And there's a massive difference between the reading level and then who's the audience for the book. So that's why it's so important to have a certified school librarian in each school. But we also know there are different configurations of schools in our state. There may be a K-8 school, a 6-12, or even a K-12 school. And that school may share a library, but with this certified school librarian in there, they would be creating areas for our younger readers, and then areas for our older readers. Okay, so when we think about students and their right to read, students do have First Amendment rights, and those do not end when they enter the school. So you will see the Supreme Court case Island Trees versus Pico referenced in school district policies that are created around library materials. So this case was a Supreme Court case from the 70s in which a student challenged the school board's decision to remove books from the school library due to the complaints of a group of parents. And throughout the past year, we've heard a lot about the term obscenity when it comes to books. And most of the time, we find that that term is being used as a synonym for inappropriate, which is definitely something that's subjective. When we think about, if you are someone who has raised kids and you may have had certain rules about what they can watch or what games they could play, what books they can read. And when I was a school librarian and served as a school of nearly 1,000 students, every single student had different family rules. And as one person trying to provide library materials for everyone, it's impossible for one person, to keep up with all of the different expectations that families set for their students. So we purchase for the general population that we serve, to the community standards that we serve, and work with parents, anytime that they have a concern. Okay, so we'll go back to the word obscene. So in order for a work to be deemed obscene, it would have to be evaluated by a federal or state court using the Miller test, which is a tripart test established by the Supreme Court case of Miller versus California. And the work must be judged in its entirety, so not picking and choosing pieces or excerpts, and the work must meet all 3 criteria of the test. Okay, so we are going to see how this is playing out in Tennessee. So last year we had country music star John Rich calling librarians the guy in the white van. We had Mouse banned in McMinn County. Governor Lee calling for legislation for school libraries in his State of the State address. We even had youth from Collierville in West Tennessee engaging with legislators about the issues and their right to read. And then we had a state representative talking about burning books that are removed from a library. And this brought students, families, and members of the community, authors, and librarians engaging time and time again to speak up. This took and continues to take a lot of our time and energy. And that means time away from family. That means adding additional work to already very full plates, and even causing disruption to health and mental health. So if you have teachers and librarians in your life, make sure they're okay. I had a lady from New Jersey reach out to me last year and just to say, I've been following what's going on in Tennessee. Are you okay? And that just made me cry. That was so sweet and special that someone so far away was paying close attention and was concerned. So at a TASL board meeting this past year, we were sharing the health issues that we had encountered since we entered into this legislative battle this past year. And one person said, well, I'm on blood pressure medicine now. And another said, well, I'm on blood pressure medicine now. And the next person said, well, my hair's falling out. So we, we've been through a lot. But we definitely felt the pain of having our profession and our careers targeted. And all the while, this whole time, for years and years, as long as I've been a librarian, and even longer, parents and guardians, community stakeholders have had ways to address a concern about a book in their school district without it having to ever reach the level that it has reached. So with the process already in place, we just simply ask for people to follow it because it's there to support them and to ensure that their concern is heard. Okay, so let's dig into what passed last year, because what passed last year is affecting, the way we do things now. We'll start with some good news before I jump into this. One of the best things that came out of the legislative session last year was a state coordinator of school libraries will be reinstated to the Tennessee Department of Education. And that's been a position that's been missing for the whole 21st century. So someone had the job in the 90s, there was a commissioner change, and then that job was eliminated. So in the age of information, in the digital age, that's a huge voice that's been missing. So the department's in the process of hiring for that role, and we've been told that someone's been hired, so we're eagerly awaiting to see what's next. Okay, but last year In addition to the state coordinator, here's some of the other things that we faced. So the governor in his State of the State called for legislation affecting school libraries, and that became the Age Appropriate Materials Act. So this legislation was carried by Senator Johnson and Representative Lamberth, and it establishes these things that you see here, that materials are reviewed for age appropriateness. They are posted online. There's a selection policy, so a procedure for librarians to select books following certain criteria. A reconsideration policy provides a way for parents or guardians or student or staff member to challenge a book. And then the districts have a procedure to review and respond to those challenges. These were things that every school librarian I know already had in place. This has been in place for years and years, but this ensures that if there was any district in Tennessee that didn't have this in place, they would now have it. In mid-August, it was expanded to affect our classroom libraries. So you may have seen a lot in the news about teachers having to also go through books that they have in their classrooms and post those online. So that has caused districts to have to figure out a process, for staff members to follow and get those materials posted. And that has caused some teachers to just say, you know what, it's not worth it, and I'm just going to pack it up and not have a classroom library. And so I see in the chat, how is age appropriateness determined? And so that's, the bill definitely did not provide any guidance on that. And we'll get to the State Textbook Commission in a minute. They will have a little part to play, but age appropriateness, typically, if I am putting together a book order for my school, I'm going to review the curriculum. I'm going to review the requests from students or staff, and I'm going to put together my order, and I'm going to check each book for the interest level. So who is the audience for the book? I'm going to check the reading level, and I'm going to check reviews from educational journals such as School Library Journal, the Horn Book. I'm going to see what the reviewers are recommending and who the book is for. But so it can be a little bit of a tricky thing to sort of figure out, because sometimes the reviews may not fully address some of the content that is, the specific content in the book. Books don't come with, warning labels like TV shows or games or anything like that. And so that's why it's important for a certified school librarian who's been trained in materials collection to be the one involved in this process. Okay, so the State Textbook Commission was expanded from 10 members to 12, and they now have the power to hear a book challenge. And if a book is challenged in a district and the person who challenged the book is not satisfied with the outcome of the challenge, they may take it to the State Textbook Commission. And our concern is that the State Textbook Commission's decision is final for the state. So if a book is challenged, let's say in Williamson County at the state level, and the Textbook Commission decides that this book does not need to be in Tennessee public schools, that means we in Metro have to remove it. That means Knox County has to remove it, Shelby County. It impacts all K-12 schools in the whole state. We are glad that Tassel had the opportunity to make a presentation to the Textbook Commission last fall and discuss or propose things for the Textbook Commission to consider if they are reviewing a book and considering removing it from Tennessee schools. Just remember, they have options. Maybe it's the situation where they say this book is only for high school libraries, for example. Instead of just removing it entirely. Because again, it goes back to an earlier point that School libraries are a place of voluntary inquiry. There's not a contract when you check out a book. You do not have to finish it. You do not have to, even read it. You can return it. And, students mostly get their access to books from our school libraries. So the State Textbook Commission met in November, and they had a deadline, according to the bill, to issue guidance on age appropriateness by December 1st. So that deadline has passed, and we are awaiting guidance. They are realizing the magnitude of what they're being asked to do. The Textbook Commission does not have a staff, nor do they have, their own attorney. So they have a lot to sort through. So we are waiting more information. Okay, another law that passed impacts our online resources. So in Tennessee, we are fortunate to have a wonderful collection of databases that is provided free to all school districts and even to all of you, to all Tennesseans. So it's called the Tennessee Electronic Library. We call it TEL for short, TEL. So most school districts may not even fund additional databases because they're so expensive. We provide a couple of extra databases in our district, and literally one of them was like $30,000. So these things are not cheap. And so to have the state provide this wonderful collection of high quality, credible resources for our students to use, it is such a money saver. What we saw in book legislation was also carried over here into online resources, as far as let's put a little extra work on TEL with their vendor partnerships to have vendors review everything to ensure that there's access to pornography or obscenity is prevented. Okay. Let's talk about something that did not pass and kind of the chilling effect that we're living with currently. So this was SB 1944, the Obscenity and Pornography Bill. This was brought by Representative Sapicki, and it would criminalize a librarian or teacher for having a book deemed obscene by a school board. So a first offense would be a misdemeanor, and a subsequent offense would be a Class E felony, which could mean prison time. And what we saw time and time again last year, and continue to see, is passages taken from books and read at school board meetings and legislative hearings. And because of that one passage in the book, they want the book removed, and often at the end of the day, they want someone to be charged, for having this book. And so the reading of those excerpts at meetings and hearings, typically the person speaking about the book has not utilized the procedure that a district has in place for hearing their concern. So they just want to skip that part and go straight, to the school board, and it just creates some fear mongering with this shock and awe type of approach. So the district, you address the concern at the local level at your school. If you're not satisfied there, you can turn in the reconsideration form. And then that starts the timeline for the school or district to form a committee of school stakeholders, read the work as a whole, and have a discussion as to whether the book should be kept or have limits placed on who can access it, or if it is to be removed from the libraries. So what this legislation did was just create increased fear and worry among librarians and teachers and school leaders, which is sometimes resulting in what we call silent censorship. So for example, this could be an administrator goes into the library after school and just removes some books that they know people are talking about. Or a librarian is, planning their book order, but chooses not to order things that they know students in their school community would love and benefit from, but it may be a book that could get them in trouble or get their name, smeared across social media. And so it's sort of living in this fear in which we see the silent censorship happen. And so because of this, and because you saw earlier the types of books that are most targeted, which tend to be books that feature marginalized characters, themes, or are written by authors from marginalized communities. And it also goes back to an earlier point of how obscenity is defined. So typically the person talking about the book is saying it's obscene, but we think they're really talking about that they feel it's inappropriate. And of course, they're entitled to feel that a book is inappropriate. They're entitled to work with the school to make accommodations for their child. But when we're talking about them wanting to make a change to what all children have access to read, then that's a different story. We've also been living in, because of this, kind of it's just a gray area, because we never know what they're going to find obscene or inappropriate. It's sort of like, I'll know it when I see it type of approach. So when we're saying we already have the procedures and policies in place to handle a concern, but when the people who have the concerns aren't working with us and are kind of going around us and being loud and creating this sense of panic and fear, it's really hard on us, because we want to do the right thing, but we have to work within the policies that we have in place. So ultimately, no one wants to feel that their job is on the line and just subject to the court of opinion, at the end of the day. Okay, so if you have people in your lives, or maybe, you have children at home and you have a concern about a book, or someone who has, I encourage you to, to share with them, like every district has a procedure. Start at the school level, start with your librarian, start with your principal, let them know about the concern that you have. As a school librarian for 20 years, I never had a concern about a book move to a formal challenge, ever. Because now, did I have concerns brought to me? Absolutely. But through just civil discourse and listening to one another, we were always able to work out a solution, that worked for everyone, that didn't impact the access for all of the students in the building. And so, that's ultimately what we want. We want to have that conversation so we can make those accommodations and address those concerns at the local level. So again, just know that the school district has a procedure in place. It's typically found on the district website, along with the school board policies. So just bring your concern to the librarian, to the administrator. And then if you don't feel supported, you can file a formal challenge. And by completing the reconsideration form, that sets the process in motion for the work to be reviewed. So when you hear the legislators saying, we want to create a process for parents or guardians, and there is one. We have one, and it does work, and it does ensure that their concern is heard with fidelity. Okay, so what can we expect this year? So the filing deadline recently passed, as Karen mentioned. There's a lot that came in. Please know that TASL has not yet had a chance to get together and meet and go through these bills, and fully understand what we're looking at, but I am going to put them on your radar in case you want to track them as well. But we do see one I want to show you that will look familiar. is at the bottom of the screen, one brought by Representative Lynn and Senator Hensley. Looks a lot like HB 1944. That did not pass last year. So this bill says obscenity and pornography, as introduced, removes the educational justification of a person possessing obscene material if the person is at a school building, bus, school campus, grounds, recreational area, athletic field, or other property owned, used, or operated by a local education agency. So while that may not be specific to school libraries, so we're seeing HB 1944 come back in some way. We also see with school vouchers, the private institutions who take those vouchers also being held to the same standards as the public schools as far as publishing lesson plans, syllabus, list of library materials online. We have one by Representative Reagan and Senator Hensley as it relates to higher education. We have one that addresses devices and their capability of accessing the internet. And schools have had, are continually, we have entire departments dedicated to IT support and cybersecurity and, protecting children from things online. Okay, and this is a few more things that we are watching out for. We have one by Representative Lynn. Prohibits teachers or employees of an LEA from discussing sexual preferences or drug use with a student of the LEA during school instruction or a school activity. Prevents LEA from displaying symbols of drug or drug paraphernalia on school grounds. And then we have a bill that counteracts the Age Appropriate Materials Act as far as the classroom libraries are concerned. So Representative Jernigan and Senator Yarbrough filed a bill. It says, as introduced, excludes materials obtained by an individual teacher which are made available in the teacher's classroom to students assigned to the teacher's class or classes from having to be identified in a list posted to the school's website. I'm sure all of the legislators have heard from many teachers on this topic over the course of the year. And then the final one we're watching at this point, although once we meet as a professional organization in the coming week or two, there may be more that we've added to the list because again, this is new. But Representative Whitson, it says, as introduced, requires the Office of the Comptroller to annually conduct a review of the English language arts textbooks and instructional materials adopted for use by each LEA and public charter school to ensure they are aligned to Tennessee's academic standards and annually submit a report detailing the findings of the review to the Education Committee of the Senate and House of Representatives. And so Representative Whitson is in Williamson County. So I imagine because of the concern over wit and wisdom, which is the elementary ELA curriculum used there. It's also used in MNPS. It's used in many, many districts across the United States, but I'm sure that that has stemmed from the concerns from that area. So this is, I hope, is a helpful overview of kind of how things nationally tie into what's going on in Tennessee, where we've been, perhaps where we're going. We're not sure how these bills will evolve over the course of the next few months. So we will see. But I'd like to take time to answer questions you have.
So, Lindsey, you've done an incredibly good job, both with the presentation, but also as things have come in, you've actually incorporated many of the questions that came in. I really appreciate that. I think you mentioned how age appropriateness is determined, and I'm not sure if that will be further dealt with, I guess, during this session or not. Do you see that as an issue that will come up in these?
I do wonder how that will come up. I think when the textbook commission creates their guidance on age appropriateness and issues that, it will really come to a head at that point.
Yeah.
Because yes, the law does not address the expectations that anyone's to follow on selecting those materials.
And they have they, as I went to the website and realized that they haven't any meeting minutes since the end of 21.
Mm,
I have no, I mean, it's very hard to know what they're up to. I think you mentioned that
right.
they were late with their report, but
Hmm.
more than late with the report.
Right.
Maybe they didn't meet or they didn't have, but anyway, it sounds like it
Hmm.
will be interesting.
It
Uh,
will be, that will be something to watch for sure.
Another question is, are there a list of books that have been banned already?
Mm-mm. There is not, and since I've been here, like I've not seen a list. I know that books have been challenged, for over the course of time, of any school district, but we do not currently, to my knowledge, have anything in MNPS. And other school districts, it's not something that they are going to keep a list of on a public facing site. That will be something that is kind of for their internal use as they, review curriculum or consider purchasing additional curriculum, or that librarians are aware of as they are making purchases for their school libraries. And then,
I think it's coming fast and furious. Would you like
yeah,
to? Okay, I'm going to let you.
sure.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, I've got them up. I can just read them. That's fine. And then legal challenge to books which have been banned. So, what we may see occasionally is, well, not occasionally, but what we may see in the future. Two things. Number one, if it reaches the state textbook commission level, that will be something, that the ACLU of Tennessee is watching very, very closely. The ACLU of Tennessee also has ways for, a student to reach out and work with them, much as our student Pico did in the 70s when his school board, just pulled a whole bunch of books, which does lead me, let's see, while we're on this subject, let me click over here to my last slide. But here are some resources that if you are interested in digging a little deeper into how to support intellectual freedom in Tennessee, these are just some things I want to put on your radar. The Ed Trust Truth in Classrooms has a lot of good resources, as well as Unite Against Book Bans. And then I would follow Tassel and TLA on social media, because our organizations are regularly sharing information about legislation that we are watching. All right, I'll get back in the questions here. Yes, this is happening incredibly in Williamson County. It is recently a group of parents did sue the superintendent about the Wit and Wisdom curriculum. And that is something that I would encourage you to read an article about exactly the terms of the case and the outcome. But basically, the judge basically said, you really just don't have a case here, and threw it out. The comptroller, I'm confused by that too, Debbie. My father worked for the comptroller's office for over 40 years. And so that's a conversation I want to have with him. Like, how would the comptroller affect, what a district has as far as making sure it's aligned to Tennessee state standards? I mean, it just looks like our trained educators have that background and know best. But so I would like to know more myself. Why was Wit and Wisdom considered controversial? So what I have seen and I'm speaking as, I'll just speak as I'm a resident of Williamson County and an employee of Metro Nashville Public Schools. So I get to, I hear a lot. But as far as living in Williamson County, what I've seen is there's a lot of concern around just the themes of the books being heavy or dealing with topics that they feel might be too old for the kids. And the other side of that too is there's a lot of concern around critical race theory, or a lot of concern about LGBTQ plus themes. And so when you're trying to provide diversity, when you're trying to provide books that, we want our kids to read high quality, rigorous texts, sometimes the rigorous texts require a lot of critical thinking, which can lend itself to having some deeper themes in the books for kids to read about and think about. And so that's quite a balance. But Chalkbeat did a wonderful article about that specifically, and I'll see if I can go back to it here in a minute and find it for you. I did have it in one of my headlines in an earlier slide, but it really was a deep dive into that issue and the ultimate result. So like 30 texts were brought to the board in Williamson County and over the Wit and Wisdom curriculum. And one text, it was called Walk Two Moons. It's a Newbery Award-winning book, was removed from the 4th grade curriculum. And the other books that were brought to their attention were either, and all of the books were reviewed, were either dismissed, or maybe some bumpers were placed on the books of like, this book should only be for this grade level, not this younger grade level, for example. How does this affect the process in Nashville in which any student can access public library books? Yeah, so in Nashville, we have a partnership with Limitless Libraries, and that does allow a student in our schools to be able to check out a material from the public library, and it's couriered to the school. And so what parents need to know is that, because they have a Nashville Public Library card too, if we kind of let them discuss at home, either I as your parent, allow you to check out things from the public library, or I as your parent don't allow you to, because parents can opt out if they prefer. They can also link their own Nashville Public Library card with their child's if they feel that it's important, to monitor. And so we love that partnership, and we find that it does great things for our kids to open it up. And we are just making sure that we're in compliance with the laws that are in existence. And then you have so much on your plate. Is this happening to this extent in other states? Yes, our colleagues in Florida, our colleagues in Texas and in Pennsylvania are really, really feeling it, even to a higher degree than we are. It is very concerning.
Melissa, you had your hand up for a while. I don't know if you're still there.
Yeah. Well, going back to the age appropriateness, I'm sure, librarians everywhere are well aware that, physical age and mental capacity are two very different things. And I think about, some of our students who may be classified as talented and gifted or something of that nature, as well as, those with learning disabilities. So it seems to me that, not only is the the law kind of really vague. It's even more vague when it comes to any type of qualifiers that, you know, and I wonder too, and I'll look into this myself, but you know, the makeup of the commission, one would hope that these are people who are, you know, possess library science or, you know, education backgrounds, child's development, that type of thing. But I suspect cynically, I guess, that in Tennessee, a lot of times it's just, you know, Joe from the corner store who, you know, grew up with Bobby. And
Yeah,
I see that, you know,
you're on to something. Yeah. And yes, and to just address your comment and like your observation about the levels of reading that kids may exhibit in a single school, it is phenomenal. You have students who are just in the middle school. I can speak to the school that I worked in for 20 years. You know, I had students who needed things that were age appropriate, but were at a lower reading level. And I definitely had students who were reading just far above, you know, what their physical age was. And it was incredible. And so to try to find materials that meet that wide variety of needs, you know, requires me as the librarian to really, really know my kids and to work with their teachers, to constantly message to families that I'm here, you know, here to support you. I'm here to support your students. You know, let's work together. I could guide students, you know, who were maybe not ready for certain topics, kind of guide them to other selections. So it takes a lot on the school librarian to really know their readers. And then as far as the textbook commission, I mean, I'm glad that we have 2 school librarians were added to the commission. So that will be a plus. We have there are 2 superintendents. There are other educators, and then there are a couple of just Tennessee citizens on the commission. So it is a wide variety of voices. I don't have the link handy, or I would drop it in the chat, but I would do a Google of the Tennessee State Textbook Commission meeting from November of 2022, and I encourage you to watch the meeting because their meetings are public, and that will give you some really good insight.
Debbie, what?
Yeah. Thank you. So Lindsey, back in the 90s, when I ran an education foundation, I had overseeing a grant to libraries in metro schools. And one of the concerns that we had then, and I worry that it might be coming back again because of this, is that there just wasn't a lot of new books coming into libraries. And I'm afraid that librarians, just out of caution, will just say, you know, it's just not worth the stress. And I still remember a child from somewhere in the Middle East, I think from Lebanon. And he was holding a book that was like my first book of Arabs. And it was written in the 60s, and it said that Arabs lived in villages with lots of flies and no sanitation. And he said, this is not my country. This is not where I came from. And he was in tears over it. And it shows the value of making sure that you have current materials and things that are relevant at that moment to kids. And so I just wonder if you're seeing a chilling effect, both on the part of the librarians, but also maybe from school districts that are saying, we don't need to invest that much in libraries anymore because it's just going to be a headache for us.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point, Debbie. And I feel like from what I've experienced in Metro, it's a little different here than in our more suburban or rural counties. But Yes, you're right. What I have seen is librarians in some cases are hesitant to purchase materials, either about, a controversial topic that's important for students, to know about in today's time, especially if they are pursuing a career path in higher ed. And because we want them to leave our public schools with those good critical thinking skills and that good, general knowledge foundation and ability to think through and, and express their opinions and thoughts on controversial issues. And also, yes, with those older materials, we do find that in some cases, because school districts aren't required to fund a certain amount to their libraries. Metro is, other districts are not. We find that school libraries just don't have the budgets to renew and update as much as they should. And so occasionally there are, like you mentioned that example, some really just heavily outdated topics out there. And that's not, the State Department of Education says Tennessee best for all, and like that's not best. It's an example of that.
So we're nearing the end. There's a question in the chat about the specifics about mouse, which I think made it the national level.
So that drew a lot of attention to Tennessee, and even the author took note and responded. And, we know that book represents, his life experience and experience of his parents. And so in McMinn County, they voted to remove it from the 8th grade curriculum. So it's my understanding that while it may be still part of the libraries, for example, it is not part of that curriculum anymore, or a book that students would be taught or a teacher would teach. But as far as the textbook commission is concerned, we are thinking about instances like that. And what if that was not a satisfactory answer for the person who brought the concern to the district? And what if they take that to the state level? And then what if the state textbook commission says, well, mouse shouldn't be in any of our schools? And what does that say, about our home, about the place that we live? And so we are anxiously kind of standing by and hoping that the people on the commission will take these kinds of things that are brought to them very, very, very seriously.
Oh my. Well, Lindsey, thank you so much for this presentation. It's hard to, I think we all of us on this call have memories. For me, incredibly important, fond, essential memories of librarians. My mother was in Upper Michigan and read the entire Carnegie Library that was available in, I believe it was Kingsford, Michigan, because it was very small, but it was essential for her. And so libraries and books and reading and access is just so essential. And actually going back to Carnegie libraries is almost like something we've forgotten, I think. So thank you so much for what you've done. And thank you everybody for being here. There will be a number of people have asked, Lindsey, is there any last things you would like to tell us? Or
thank you all for this opportunity. It's so great to connect with you and to know that there are others out there who are supportive and who are allies. And on behalf of Tassel, we just so greatly appreciate you in being interested in learning about this topic and, and sharing with others in your community.
thank you again. For those of you who are interested in, there were questions about passing this to other folk who weren't able to make it. Our website will have it. There is a link to on the blog. We will put the hot topic up. And Lindsey, you have your email and contact, and I can ensure, if you would put that just for the
Sure thing.
into the chat for folk, so that they will then probably hit you up. I hope
Yes,
you
that
were.
will be. And if I didn't get to answer your question, please email me. I'll be happy to chat with you.
She's wonderful too. She's very, very responsive. And it's just, thank you, Lindsey, so much. It's been so great. And thank you all for your wonderful questions. And, you know, go out and read, please. So I believe, is it Laura that's, yeah? Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Still here. Thank you so much.